everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who don't want to stay in that place, who want to really find freedom and abundance and peace and thrive in their lives. I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband, Evan.
Good morning.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us today, Monday.
Yeah, and we're halfway through March already.
That is really crazy.
But yeah, big opportunity day.
I'm always excited for the entire week to spread out in front of us all this room.
It's pretty exciting.
Awesome. So as you guys know, we work our way through the CSCS. They are adaptations of Peter Ralston's Tai Chi principles. They're being calm, surrendered, centered, connected, and complete. And we go through one of those each weekday as a reminder, A, but B, because just being around the principles is so life-changing. You know, if you can listen to the podcast 5 days a week, I can guarantee your life will change just because you're going to be exposed to these principles. I know it's changed my life, having to record it and then listening to it regularly and going, oh, wow, yeah, that stuff is important still. And
there's something about, I mean, we don't just, there's no, I don't think there's any such thing as just one and done. Like, oh, I heard something once and I learned it and now I'm good to go. Like, I think in life, everything is degrees and we learn that way, I think.
Right.
I mean, that's why we keep reading the scripture over and over. Like, you could read the Bible in a year and be like, well, got that done. But people read it every year or whatever. And they read the same passages over and over again, and the Holy Spirit is revealing something new. So that's what we're trying to do here. Keep talking about the things that are important, these CSC principles, and we're so happy to be able to share them with you.
And the more you're around them, the more you will soak up like a sponge. Yeah, I have definitely experienced that in my own life, going to my Tai Chi class all the time, which is what got me into the CSCs in the first place. Mm-hmm. This week, we are talking about suffering.
Yeah, boy.
Sounds like it's such a downer, heavy topic.
Yeah, but I think it's, I don't know, hopefully it'll be a good pairing with last week. We talked about God's love all last week, and this is an important part of that. It's kind of the other side of the coin. You know, when it steals our calm, it's like, for me anyway, I see, you know, there's things like these school shootings or war or homeless people or my own suffering, right? My own little things that I can't deal with. And it's just like
our car last week.
Sure. Yeah. We don't see the reason, and it gets very confusing, I think. And a lot of non-Christians see that and they're like, well, God must not be as powerful as he says he is, or he must not
be good.
Yeah, right.
And those are kind of the two options. Like either he's not good or he's not powerful enough to stop what's happening.
Mm-hmm. And then I think for the Christian, it feels like we struggle with some of that stuff too. Like maybe God's not powerful enough to solve my problem, because if he was, he would do it this certain way.
Right.
But yeah, I guess we should back up a little bit first and talk about what are we even talking about? What's suffering?
I think suffering is anything that isn't in line with the way we were designed to be. So for me, I include all kinds of stuff in there, like being at a job that's the opposite of the way you're designed to be, being sick, so physically your body's not operating the way that it's designed to be, having broken relationships because that's not how our relationships are designed to be. I mean, it's all these places where sin has just infiltrated the world and made things not the way God designed them to be.
Yeah.
And I think because our souls, on some level, know what we're designed to be like, it's suffering when we're not in that place.
And it's interesting that we still want to blame God, even though we've already acknowledged kind of the standard is a whole family, a healthy body, and a fulfilling life. Like that's what God's designed us to live in. And then when that gets broken, and we're blaming God instead of, you know, the sin of ourselves and of others is causing all this stuff.
Well, I think too, it's hard sometimes, you know, like with an earthquake. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, well, the world's broken, and yeah, it was sin that broke it in the first place, but why did God make it so that the world was broken with sin? You know, you can go back and just be like, well, the Lord should have made it that so that sin was not so devastating. Or
sin, right? Well, yeah, it's such a deep rabbit hole,
right?
I mean, because sin has to be devastating,
right?
If we can't get out of this sinful world through the ultimate form of suffering, which is death, we're stuck in suffering forever. It's
Right.
it's a grace as well.
Yeah.
I mean, anyway.
Well, and I think, when you start recognizing that it's because our souls long for perfection, that's why we suffer.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because, I don't know. And yes, it is. The thing itself is difficult. And I don't want to make light of suffering at all, because I know that is a major thing for a lot of people. I was one of the things that I really struggled with in college. And when people were like, well, just have faith, it was like, oh, I just want to strangle you right now.
Like you've never had, I know, yeah. Everybody has their own brand of suffering, and the Christian community, I think, is so bad at, if you hear somebody else share their brand and you're like, I've never experienced that. You just got to believe a little harder. But
right.
if you
read your
keep
Bible,
thinking
pray.
about it, that person would maybe eventually share their thing that they can't really handle. Like we all have this suffering that we go through because everything's broken around us.
Right. But, I mean, that is the amazing thing about Christianity, is because, neither are we, because we're not on either end of the spectrum. Like, this is the way that I have seen people handle suffering, by saying it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
like that book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, It's All Small Stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, that one drives me nuts.
Is that a whole
just
book
that idea.
or just a saying?
It became a book,
Okay.
but it was just a saying, and I have had people say that to me over and over, and I'm like, dude, okay.
They're trying to give you an eternal perspective, I guess. Like,
right.
look, in the grand scheme of things, but we're in that moment where it's a big thing, whatever it is.
Exactly. And some of these things, finding out that I had a chronic illness, that I might be in a wheelchair the rest of my life, that was not oh yeah, no big deal. That was pretty devastating, going through that and just being like, okay, Lord, are you still taking care of me? Because it does not feel like it.
Yeah. And it's important to feel that. You see these amazing stories of people with disabilities, or, people still doing amazing things in spite of it, but we know that it's always an in spite of.
Right.
And that there still has to be a grief and mourning process there, even if 20 years later they're able to somehow embrace this new way of living, but it's still not what you're designed for, which is what you said suffering was.
Yeah. So we don't have to ignore the suffering in Christianity, which is so amazing to me, that we can both hang on to how difficult it is, or, the other end of the spectrum is to be like, it's so difficult, it's so hard, obviously God isn't taking care of me, and we lose our faith. Mm-hmm. But Christianity is in the middle, where we say, this is difficult, this sucks. Like, I hate this, it's suffering, it's awful, the world is broken, and God is faithful.
Yeah.
And he's still redeeming.
Yeah, I think we as Christians want to, I think we want to get through all the icky stuff and skip to, like, if something bad happens and it's like, well, let's just try to sort it out as quickly as possible. But the ultimate, well, not the ultimate. There's a big example in Exodus where Joseph gets betrayed by his brothers and sold as a slave, but that ultimately becomes the way that the family's saved from the famine later, and then the entire nation's enslaved. And then Moses comes, and the nation is born. So there's a bunch of suffering there, but there's lots of time too. I mean, when Joseph sees his brothers for the first time, he's not sure if he can forgive them. He has to
trust them.
Yeah,
and he says he's forgiven them, but I think that's such a perfect example of those safety tests safe tests for trusting people, because he puts them through a safe test to be like, are you going to do the same thing that you did before? And maybe it's a more rigorous safe test, but considering the stakes, it kind of needed to be.
Yeah. I think the point of today's episode is suffering's not ever pointless, and it's never not redeemable. It's devastating as it is. God, in his power, we think suffering shows a lack of power in God, but in his power can actually and does redeem it, and can do great things. And we can be changed in ways that we otherwise could not be changed through the suffering.
Right. Yeah, a lot of the time, I mean, for instance, with my illness, you know, one of the things that was the most difficult part that we went through was having whooping cough on top of my chronic illness and spending almost a year. I mean, it was like 6 months where I couldn't talk. I couldn't even lay down in bed because I would cough until I threw up. It was awful.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just pretty much bedridden, well, chair-ridden because I couldn't lay in bed. But I mean...
Yeah, that was a bizarre time. I mean, it seemed like everything was just on pause and we were just waiting. Mm-hmm. And it took a long time to heal.
Right. And I still haven't completely gotten over just my energy levels and stuff. But through that experience, my joints healed a bunch and I was able to get all the way out of a wheelchair, which was pretty awesome. So, yeah, it was definitely one of those things where it was like, I would rather we didn't have to go through that, but, you know, the Lord worked in it.
Yeah. And I've learned a lot during that time too, and I don't think I would have been able to learn those things. I don't know how else I would have learned them, I guess. I mean, maybe there would be another way, but that's the way I did. I mean, my faith was tested and it grew, and it
was really hard.
Yeah, very, very difficult. And it still is, but God's still good too. And he's in the redemption business all day, every day, open 24 hours.
Totally. I love that God redeems this moment and this moment and this moment. You know, in Romans 8, where it talks about how God works all things for the good of those who love him. And that's part of his love. Like C.S. Lewis, we were talking about last week, how he says that he's perfecting us, you know, making us into Jesus's image. And because of that, that means sometimes we have to keep moving. And we wouldn't do that without a little bit of a push. Hopefully, man, I feel like that was really heavy, but...
Well, we're going to keep unfolding this throughout the week, so
totally. Come back tomorrow. We're going to talk about the GE Moore shift. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and I'm sure everybody's like, what? Cool.
It's one of my favorite things about suffering. It's how to, like, just wrap your brain around it.
Don't spoil it.
Okay, sorry.
But it is very cool.
Anyway, we love you guys, and we're praying for you. Have an awesome Monday. Pick whether today's going to be awesome or not, because... it can be, especially extra awesome because it's Monday. But.
Yeah. Pray to understand suffering and grace, because it's it's a tough thing, but it's a big part of our faith.
Yeah, and God is totally fine with you coming to him and being like, you jerk, why are you making me go through this? This is so not fair.
He can handle that.
He can handle it. And getting the emotions out, you know, they block us from calm, so we want to process them through and move on.
If you want some inspiration, read through the Psalms. There's lots of crying out to God in there, and it's rich with examples of how to pray.
If you haven't signed up for our email newsletter yet, go ahead and do that so we can keep you posted on what's going on. Thanks to everybody that's been sharing the show and listening to the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do continue to share it. We will talk to you guys tomorrow, so come back.
Yeah, see you then.